This is Podco Media Networks.
On episode 157 of Confessions of a Marketer, Client Success. Hi, it's Mark Reed Edwards. Welcome back to Confessions of a Marketer. Iain Preston, Chief Client Success Officer for EMEA at Wunderman Thompson, is in for a chat. We'll get to that in a moment. Next time, we have Naomi Liu on marketing operations, and soon Travis Chambers, Naira Perez, Marty McDonald, and Nicholas Vandenberg. They're all on the docket, and we've got a fun few months ahead of us. As always, stay with us. Okay, on to Iain Preston. We talked as COVID was making headlines. We had client success and modern marketing as the focus of the discussion, but we started off talking about the dot-com boom and bust of 20 years ago, which I was deeply embedded in, and how empathy is so important in this global health crisis. Plus, how your life outside of work is so important, and we're all human. Plus, we do cover the needs of the modern marketer, how to consider the customer experience, collaboration inside of WPP, and of course, his role in ensuring customer success. And we close with a discussion about how Wunderman Thompson has been working with brands during the COVID-19 crisis. This was a great, enlightening discussion. I think you'll enjoy it, so let's get to it. Iain, it's great to have you on Confessions of a Marketer. Welcome.
Thanks, Mark. Great to be here.
Can you share your background and what your current role is at Wunderman Thompson?
Sure, absolutely. So, unfortunately, I've reached that category now where I'm referred to as an industry veteran, which I think is that loosely polite phrase of saying I'm getting old. But I've been around 20 years in the marketing communications industry. Started out back in the kind of startup agency world in the early 2000s. And most recently, I've been working in a series of larger network roles between networks such as Publicis and IPG RGA. And then I recently joined WPP and the Wunderman Thompson network in a newly formed role and function as the Chief Client Success Officer for EMEA.
Yeah. What was the turn of the century like in the ad business?
Oh, the Wild West. I think I entered the industry right at the point where the bubble was bursting in around 2000, unfortunately. So we had all these tales of promise and the idea that, coding was going to be something that we'd make $1,000 an hour out of every day of the week kind of thing. And then all of a sudden the bubble burst and you find yourself in a small shop with 4 colleagues in Leeds, desperately hustling up business. So I think that promise of manna from heaven of the .com era wasn't really that prophetic for me, to be honest. But then I think what it did teach you at those times was to be fleet of foot and what we'd all call agile now in today's parlance. I moved to London from Leeds in 2001. And set up our agency presence in London and ran that for 4 years. And of course, having to do that, being a smaller northern agency and then, kind of establishing ourselves in London and winning some big clients at that point in time was, a real learning exercise. I think that always stayed with me, that need to be, to hustle, to be agile and to be super client focused. I think the biggest wins for us during that period came through differentiation and being very present and visible inside our clients. And I think that's a value that I've always, wanted to keep with me right the way through my working career.
And it's a useful experience to have, right? So you made it through that downturn, you made it through the financial crisis of 12 years ago, and here we are in another one, and it's helpful to have hardship in your past when you're in this business, don't you think?
No, I think it does. And I think it also means that you have a good degree of empathy for, the people that you've encountered along the road, through those different, call them crises, call them, experiences. But I think what's been really important to me is, the proximity to clients and colleagues through any of that. And, being empathetic to the change that's undergoing in their lives. I mean, if you look at, today's situation with COVID, I don't think that anybody could have expected, frankly, the humanity that we've seen and so apparent. And for me, I think that's been really, really striking, particularly through this period, in contrast to, say, some of the financial crises that we've experienced in recent years. I think it's just an incredibly, humbling experience in many respects. Just to reflect personally, I've got my parents I isolated very early on in this process because my mum's in her mid-80s, my dad's got COPD, and I obviously traveled a lot with work. I was in Milan, in fact, right before the city lockdown took place. So I took the decision in early Feb just to make sure that we as a family were going to be completely separated. My parents were going to be, isolating themselves. And they moved to a new area and had a new set of neighbors, people they didn't know, people we didn't know. And I was very worried, frankly, that they were, how they were going to take care of themselves. I was trying to get them to use online ordering and different things like that. And literally, their nearest neighbors have completely just taken themselves into their lives at a socially distanced capacity, and
Yeah.
bringing them food, making sure they're looked after, emailing us with updates out of the blue. So I think that's pervasive, right? And I think you see that in brands as well. In the brands that we're working with, the pivot that we've made in the engagements that we've had with those brands has been, overnight, literally. The focus and our need to be completely focused around what it means for their customers to be going through these processes at the moment. Because of the services and breadth of service that we offer at Wunderman Thompson, it means that we touch businesses in very, very different ways. So while on the one hand, clients may be saying, well, we don't want to do TVCs at the moment, or we need to cut back on certain other areas of advertising, because of our relationship in other areas of those businesses, they'll be even more reliant on us making sure that we're helping them make the right decisions about, say, technology service provision, or ensuring that they're getting the right type of communications out to customers to give them the best elements of service around critical household items that they might need, or things like that. So I think again, that ability to have a real human focus at this time and understand where as a partner we can appropriate ourselves best, I think is really important.
Yeah, it is too bad that it takes something like this for people to realize that everybody's a human being, and we're all, the humanity is out there, and you see kindness every day now.
Yeah, you do. And like you say, it's unfortunate that some of these events come along to I guess remind you of that. But on the flip side of that, maybe at times we do need events like this to give us a bit of a reset moment as well about
Mhm.
what's important, but also our role and our purpose. I think purpose has been bandied around in marketing, especially in the past few years, and I think there's a lot of I think there's a lot to be lauded about that, and I think it's important. But I really think at times like this, it gives rise to us really understanding what purpose means. And then also, as we come out of this period, the fact that purpose doesn't always mean something that's necessarily benevolent in many respects, right? I think purpose is about being positive. Purpose about helping people succeed and and strive for for new opportunity is going to be equally important to helping people in a more benevolent fashion, or helping certain types of purpose there. So I think coming through this, brands are really going to find new ways that they have examined their own existence, frankly, and will find new ways to be resonant in culture and with people going forward.
Yeah, yeah. I want to talk a little more about COVID-19 when we close this out, but I want to zero in on your focus, and I want you to tell me what the needs are of the modern marketer.
Yeah, this is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think, on a spectrum of marketing history, if you like, I don't think the needs of the modern marketer could be defined as any less complex than they've ever been, right? I think
Yeah,
the nature of modern marketing is so multifaceted now that modern marketers, in the truest sense of things, are some of the most capable that we've ever seen. And so I think in terms of their expectations, I think they're the highest they've ever been in many respects. It's certainly in my firsthand experience of the people that I deal with, both on a daily basis at our clients and inside our organization, more than ever, you have to strive to be better all of the time. And so I think, inside, clients' businesses, they're looking for great talent. They're looking to inspire, new thinking as well. And I think, that in itself creates a tremendous environment for, for great things to happen and great work to happen, but also, a very high sense of expectation about everything you're doing. I think you've also got a case of, whilst clients and brands are very well equipped now, we're still at this kind of tipping point of, integration of communications, creativity, and technology. And for me, the conflation of all of those topics is where some of the best communications and best branding is taking place right now. And that's not easy, because it doesn't rely on, well, in a perfect world, it will rely on a unicorn type person who can just arrive at all of those things single-handedly. But that just isn't the truth, and that's not the case. So we have to create environments, inside our clients, alongside our clients, that essentially create these kind of unicorn-like shapes of teams, who can deliver on amazing integrated communications. And I think that's the kind of that's the peak end of things. That's the nirvana state that we're all working together to strive for, I think.
Yeah. So you are the Chief Client Success Officer for EMEA at Wunderman Thompson. And so I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is it important to keep the customer experience top of mind when you're formulating plans?
Yeah, I think so. And I think more than ever, brands are understanding that, the way that they show up and what they say to people versus what they do and how they act in the broadest possible sense is more important than ever, because it's more transparent than ever, right? And I think brands are more and more held to account, not just for the things that they say, but the things that they do. So I think for us in Wunderman Thompson, I think CX and customer experience, you'll find those techniques and capabilities, be it service design blueprints, be it CX mapping, or any of those tools and techniques from design thinking that you might come across. You'll find them equipped in such a diverse range of projects and of client engagement. So that could be a technology project, that could be something integrating with our media teams and broader WPP or other partners, or it could be, in a brand campaign. It's not the case anymore that you can ignore the fact that a message, when you put it out, just has to be impactful because it's aired on TV or it's landed a few clicks online. It has to be about the downstream impact of that and what it's representing for the overall brand. And we have to help our clients in understanding that interconnectivity of those messages. Now, I think there's also an internal imperative there as well, because inside clients' organizations, they're having to rethink how their operating model and their organization design reflects the evolving needs of customers. So unless we can help have a holistic view of customer experience, then we're only helping perpetuate, a siloed way of looking at the components that do make up a holistic experience. So, we have a responsibility as a brand, given, what I said before, Mark, about the diversity of capability and the diverse places that we touch a client's brand and their customer experiences. We have a responsibility to making sure that we provide that holistic view, wherever possible.
Yeah. I always think of agencies and great agencies like Wunderman Thompson as idea factories, as especially with now the combination of Wunderman and Thompson, that you get great data and great creative, and they combine to create ideas. So how do you think the best ideas bubble up through an organization to the client? And is there an interplay between the client and the agency?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a kind of hypothesis about this, which, well, it's not just mine, but I'm sure there's other people who think the same way around this, which is, on the topic of what I call organized serendipity, right? And I think, in large organizations, and look, let's face it, we're a large organization, but we're made up of, very diverse components within that. And I think in those types of organization, which I broadly think reflects, the larger client needs as well, there's a need to have systematic ways of bringing together, diverse minds to crack winning formulas for marketing. And I don't think we can expect anymore that that's just going to happen, or it's going to happen in one department or one place. So we have to help organize ourselves to create those moments of serendipity and create those moments of brilliance. It can't just be happenstance all the time. I think what's really impressed me again, being very recently joined in Wunderman Thompson, 6 months now. I think what really impressed me on arrival and actually coming, in early conversations was the framework that we've developed called Collision. And it's a methodology that's been honed over a variety of brand and general business challenges, actually, which helps us facilitate workshops, create new ideas, and most importantly, pilot them and get them into action in clients very, very quickly. And I think what's really impressed me about that is, the way that the organization has systematically, again, gone out to clients, evolved this kind of toolbox of capabilities, and thought about, in great detail, how you bring talent from technology, from data, from outside partners and the clients themselves, and create these kind of creative and innovation processes, but with a very strong sense of purpose that this has to be something we can prove the impact of. It's something that we have to be able to land in customers' hands in a way that they can appreciate and understand. And it's something, most importantly, that can be operationalized. It can land in a business. It's not just a lab style thing that looks cool but can't make an impact on the day-to-day business. So I think Collision for us has been our way of unlocking a lot of unexpected value in our client relationships through essentially organized serendipity.
Yeah, that's a wonderful concept, isn't it? It's almost like Chuck Close, the artist, who said that, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just get to work. And in order to have serendipity, you have to be working at it, right?
Yeah, you're right. And I think one of the quotes I like, I'm not sure who it came from though, so I'm not as genned up as you, but in engineering terms, people talk about hard points in engineering, right? Yeah. And I think some of the best creative processes and creative outcomes come from environments where you have hard points, right? And I think that's where a process like Collision is brilliant, because what it brings you is both, hard points, and using the engineering sense of things, of, be that elements of the customer experience that you just can't compromise on anymore, for example, and bringing that into sharp focus. Or it might be organization design hard points. So actually provoking us to consider, well, the reasons why a particular customer operation is the way it is, or a customer experience is the way it is. Now, that may be referred to as a hard point. It's something that is immovable, and yet from a customer perspective, something that we need to address. So I think hard points work in both ways, to use that engineering analogy. On the one hand, to help guide us to give constraints, but to provide, the right territory for creativity to take place. On the flip side of that, the identification of perceived hard points that, we need to do more than navigate inside of. Actually, we need to break them down, and we need to find other ways around them. So I think that's, it's a really fertile ground for, different types of creativity to delivering different outcomes. And to give you a couple of examples, we've done, these Collision workshops with, say, clients in pharma, where the ingoing challenge might have looked like a communications problem, but the outgoing solution turns out to be an integrated product design. You look at another business in terms of a media business who engaged with us with a very broad challenge about, monetization in their business. And that actually ended up in being a pilot of a new business model for them. So the diversity and the breadth of challenge that can come into a process like that without determining an outcome at the very beginning is crucially important. And I think clients are feeling more and more value from businesses such as ourselves in helping them navigate quite broad challenges in that way.
Yeah. So you're new at WPP and Wunderman Thompson, so maybe you don't have much to compare it with, but WPP is more integrated than it has been in the past. It's always been a kind of dispersed organization with lots of independent operating companies. And recently, Mark Reed has, my namesake, Mark Reed, by the way.
Yeah, exactly.
We do get confused occasionally. It's become more integrated. And does that change the dynamic inside Wunderman Thompson? Do you collaborate and work with other agencies outside of Wunderman Thompson?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really struck me when I was joining Wunderman Thompson, was actually the open nature of the business to collaboration. And that's not just within our own organization, because frankly, we've got, as I mentioned before, a large and complex organization by the nature of the diversity of talent and skills that we have. So, navigating the depth of those things within our business has taken a lot of rigor to build out collaboration, to build out consistent tools, consistent methodologies to be able to do that. Now you extrapolate that out to WPP, and you're right. I think, both the structure and the way the setup of the organization was a few years ago maybe restricted some of that. I think both inspired by Mark's leadership and, how that set out a change in the organization's governance has meant that open access to talent and capability is, much more effective than it ever has been. And I think I spend probably, coming into the business now, I would say about half of my time at least on what I would call broader WPP engagement activities. So that could be new business, working alongside other WPP agencies, or that might be in terms of our client organizations. So although we have, obviously large client organization teams in terms of global client leads and so on within the Wunderman Thompson organization, we're obviously big parts of broader WPP teams. There's something like 55 plus large scale global account teams around the world. And Wunderman Thompson has a significant part in a number of those. And ostensibly, you look at those global teams and, on paper, at first glance, you might go, okay, there's some mix of agencies here that, obviously complement one another very easily, be that media and our side of things and, other things. And there's other ones where they overlap. You kind of go, well, would these not be competitive relationships? Would there not be challenges in that regard? And I think, the organization's really matured to know that actually the more client focused we are and the better we are organizing ourselves to deploy the talent wherever it exists at the service of our clients, the more successful we're going to be overall. And I think that's the whole mantra within the client success community and the client success organization that we're building in Wunderman Thompson EMEA is all driven around this concept of client success. No matter what dimension that takes, our obligation is to find the right way of understanding the customer experience, of understanding how our client's organization needs to develop and evolve to meet those needs and to drive the greatest possible impact that we can. So I've been really impressed with the fact that for me joining this business, it's been easier than ever to access talent, to have the right types of conversation and be really met with a very consistent positive nature about doing the right thing for clients.
Oh, that's great. So let's talk about client success. What's your approach to it? What is the gospel that you're spreading at Wunderman Thompson about client success?
Feels like I should be wearing a dog collar or a habit or something right now when you say gospel, right? I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to this stuff, to be honest. And I think what it was is I was really intrigued by the idea of client success from the concept of customer success championed by the big technology companies, the Salesforces, the Adobes, and so on in the late 2000s, right? And their observation that as big platform businesses, it wasn't sufficient to be able to just sell licenses anymore and expect the customers who bought those licenses to deploy those and win, frankly, and have successful customer experiences. And I think it was a very astute decision to introduce customer success as a function to then consider, well, actually, how are these platforms deployed? What are they doing? Are they really as good as they could be and should be? And not end the engagement at the point where a license was, deployed to a client and put, and activated on a server. So I think thinking about that model, and there's been a few kind of thought leadership pieces done around the topic of broadening that concept, but I hadn't really seen a business, and particular services type business outside of technology, really wrap their arms around it. So when I was joining, I was talking with Ewan Sturgeon, our EMEA CEO, about this concept. And I explained to him that I thought my lens on this was really that if we look at our business through the same lens and think about client success as a kind of guiding principle, then what would that add up to? And at a very operational level, I think there's a few key things to note. One is the conflation of growth functions and the client leadership functions, because I think both capabilities need to be pointed at client success, right? They need to be pointed at things that in the outcomes that we deliver, we are as brilliant as we possibly can be. And so actually by bringing those groups together, I think we get the best of both worlds. You get, great agility and tenacity out of growth teams to be able to deploy things at speed and really get under the hood of briefs, within hours and days like nothing else. And if you look at the scale of global client relationships, you need a great deal of rigor and a long-term view in those communities of leaders to work alongside our clients to think about that perspective. So I think when you bring those capabilities together, you get a very fertile ground for creating agile teams who are very able to think about the long game from the very outset of an engagement, be that a new business engagement or be that via our coordinated planning with our clients or through collision workshops that we talked about. We find ways to completely center ourselves around these objectives of client success. I guess the other element to that then is, well, on a practical basis, what does that mean about how we measure ourselves? So I think we're moving much more towards models where we're having open conversations, not just about the performance of, say, creative and media and so on from views and from how that reaches the customer, but the downstream impact of what that actually does to increase and improve business impact within clients. So we have a number of examples where we're deploying dashboards now with clients where it's not only monitoring the effectiveness of, the placement of any of that creativity, but the outcome right down to, sales, right down to brand metrics. And so we're becoming increasingly able to deploy those capabilities. And it changes the nature of the conversation with our clients. It moves from kind of siloed conversation about one part of things to a real appreciation of the impact over the customer experience. As we talked about before, Mark, we have to be the guardians and responsible for a holistic view of customer experience because we touch so many parts of that across our group. So I think client success for me is, really our way of just, giving that a sharper focus and also, building a very inclusive community of people from around our group to champion that idea and champion its values. We've gone out to these teams and talked about two core values, really, this sense of connectors and catalysts. So, this mentality that the best thing that we can possibly do, wherever it lies, is connect to talent and find it and deploy it at the service of clients. And then the concept of catalysts. So in our teams, you find, we term T-shaped people, so hybrid people who can really understand technology, data, creativity, and really help our clients navigate those things, but have the humility in the same way as we all should, have that humility to know that you can't be a depth of expert in every possible domain. And what you need to do is be a great connector, but you need to be the great catalyst that understands how to distill that client challenge, how to understand what success looks like, and then coordinate and collate all the different various parts, to build a very quick and agile solution for our clients.
And the world is increasingly complex. There's Brexit, and now we've got COVID-19, which doesn't show any sign of abating anytime soon. I'm interested, how have you been working with brands to support them through this and then help them support their customers?
Right. It's a great question, Mark. And I think, the real shift for us has been how we very quickly adapt and change behavior, on behalf of our clients. Because on the one hand, clearly under these conditions, clients need to make tough decisions about how and where they spend. They have to make decisions about the type of message that they put out. So again, we need to be, a positive partner with them in understanding what decisions we help them make, but then also the tone and the appropriate behavior that we need to express to customers. So, that might be in the case of some of our CPG clients actually changing our advertising messages to be public service messages, right? Making sure that people are observing, the right techniques for, sanitation and so on. That might be, changing actually our technology and infrastructure capabilities. So ensuring that we are able to give the requisite uptime for the critical systems that we provide our retail or online retail businesses, where they're actually needing to get household goods to people that are absolutely essential, right? Especially for people who are isolating at the moment. So how we help those brands, look at prioritization, how we look at them qualifying and stratifying certain types of customers to know who at-risk groups are and how to get the right products to them in a timely fashion. So I think it's with that, again, back to that topic of the client success mantra here. It's very much about, the client success in this case is about servicing their customers in the most appropriate way possible, most effective way possible, and, frankly, just doing the right thing. And, that's something that we take, a great amount of responsibility and a great amount of pride in, because ultimately we all have to put our people first. The people inside our businesses, the people outside of our businesses, and those who are served by our clients, we absolutely have an obligation to put them first. And so everything that we have to do is tuned to that objective.
How has the dynamic changed now that you can't really have face-to-face meetings and that everybody's working from home or, a remote location? Has that changed the dynamic or is it pretty much the same?
I think it has changed. And I think change is this type of event is a really good catalyst for longer term change as well. And I think on the change front, that can be, strangely enough, although we're not together, I think there's some more humanizing dimensions that have come out of this situation. And it can be small things like all of a sudden we're seeing the inside of people's homes more,
Yeah,
right? So our teams, in different locations have been doing things like cribs, like a bit like MTV
right.
cribs, right? So they've been doing tours on an afternoon of people's places and stuff like that and getting a view into things. You've got all of us who've got kids in our house have had, the kids barging in at some point and, tearing in naked or, whatever, jumping
Right.
around over you while you're in the middle of a conference call. We were doing some training with our MENA regions a couple of weeks back, and my 4-year-old crept in and I ended up doing about 15 minutes of it with him sat on my lap. So,
Yeah, yeah.
you get a really human view of people. And I think that's really important. And actually, when we do go back to being in a physical environment together, I think actually a lot of us will take a great deal of that away with us. I think in a practical sense, of course, there's challenges, right? I think all of us have had the moments of the Wi-Fi going down at the very wrong minute, an audio connection not connecting on a pitch and things like that. And of course, that's massively frustrating. That adds to a stress that you wouldn't ordinarily have, either being in an office or knowing that there isn't everybody on your street on the internet at the same time, all of the time right now. The resilience of the network is brilliant, frankly, but it can only go so far, all the time. So I think there's some very practical things in terms of, people's expectations, meeting etiquette, really getting to grips with the tools that, we all use, but to use them, to use the term in anger and really, really stress test the use of tools, I think's another dimension that I think all of us have learned from. And I think, the whole concept around remote working, as we mentioned before, I spend a lot of my time in different offices and in different markets and locations. And right now, I'm much more reliant on obviously the remote working tools that we used before, but actually the depth with which we use them now is greater than ever. And I think you see that in all organizations. I think how much more conversant and how much more accepting we are of this approach to collaboration is going to be really interesting. It's fascinating, actually, Mark, because I know we talked about collision already, but collision, on the one hand, when you see it, is you talk to clients and the thing that really resonates with them is the physical nature of it, right? It's, large CX maps, big collaborative workshops, breaking out into different rooms to do different things, actually going to different sites in many cases and spreading some of those pieces across different weeks. And we've actually had to kind of refactor the toolbox of collision to be run remotely. So we've been running a number of these across various different locations in EMEA and beyond. And, now, using tools like Miro boards instead. So actually having virtual walls of, almost like scrapbooking virtually, and then thinking about how we adapt our exercises to build chemistry with, frankly, with people we've never met, right? So, we could be doing pitch meetings, we could be doing chemistry with teams that we haven't met before. We could indeed be working with people who are very accustomed to working in a very physical fashion and having to adapt and change to, this remote activity, and helping, all of us train on tools, especially at client side, maybe they wouldn't be so familiar with. So I think that's been a fascinating experience. And I think we'll all, in a positive sense, I think we'll take things away from this set of circumstances that will actually change us, for the good overall in terms of how we behave around work.
Yeah. Yeah. To say nothing of the whole humanity thing that we talked about earlier, just using these tools to become productive when you're not in the physical office is, in a way, it's kind of revolutionary.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in an organization like ours, we'd always say that we'd be early adopters of those things, anyway. But I think it is the prevalence, and it being now, it should be a first port of call rather than a fallback. And I think that is going to really, really change, the way we organize ourselves. And I think also, as to a degree, our clients' expectations of certain things as well. I think, our agency environments and our business environments have been so important over the years, and I don't think that should go away. But I think how we decide to use the time that we have in physical locations will become, I think, more progressive is probably a good term. I think, it's very valuable to have human contact. And I'm a person who really relies on it, frankly, in being with my teams and being amongst our clients and so on. But I also believe that there is some real value in thinking about more systematic tools and services that we actually use when we are together, that perhaps today we don't go into the depths of doing that because we take for granted that we can be in one place. And so I think actually there's going to be a greater degree of efficiency that we take out of this when we do have physical contact again, when we are in one another's company. And I think by default, I think we'll also then spend a bit more time working remotely, finding moments where we just want to be in a different place because, many people will find that more efficient now.
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting, I think, when I talk to someone in your business. I talk to creatives, I talk to people who, know data, but I always love talking to a client advocate, and I really appreciate your perspective. It was great to have you on.
Mark, great to talk to you. Thank you very much for inviting me. Cheers.
Thanks so much. All right, next time, my old friend and colleague, Naomi Liu, on marketing operations. Confessions of a Marketer is a trademark of Podco Media Networks, and this episode is copyright 2020. I'm Mark Reed Edwards. Stay healthy and see you next time.